Hi, today we are going to talk about Spring Framework. Spring as a framework has become quite popular in the Java space, especially if we compare Spring from the frameworks that are available as part of Java standards. Spring has really gained a lot of ground in last many years. So, before we get too much deep into Spring, let's little bit look into the history. So Spring as a framework was introduced by Rod Johnson in 2004, and most of the ideas of the framework are basically from his book called Expert 121 J2E Design and Development. Those who have been to Java World recently, they may not appreciate so much that why Spring has become so popular. It has sort of become a de facto choice at the moment for many web applications and desktop based applications. At least the middle layer, that's where Spring has become one of the most prevalent choices. So if we look back into history a little bit, I we if we want to appreciate Spring properly, we need to look in especially into EJB 2.1. So when EJB 2.1 came, it was quite a good idea if you look at the time at which it came. But with EJB 2.1, the kind of programmatic model that came up with, it was quite complex. And the another major issue with that kind of programmatic model was that the application development team has to more focus in about the programming constructs than the actual business value that needs to be built for in the program. Those who have done in EJB 2.1 might remember about the number of classes you have to write to do anything trivial. Spring was quite interesting introduction at that point of time, where it sort of abstracted all those nuts and bolts of an application from the development, so that the development team can actually focus on the business logic part of the things. If we try to define Spring in a simple way, we can say that it's a framework which has encapsulated a lot of design patterns as part of its core. And what it does is that basically exposes nice interfaces, so that the developers has to just focus on basically on the real business value. So let's do one thing. Let's first build a basic Spring application for a hello world. It's been a tradition to do that. So let's do the tradition. So what we'll do is that we have Eclipse ready. You might just want to have Eclipse with your Maven installed into that. So what I'll do is that I'll make a new project. So file, new project, and I'll make a Maven project. We'll just take the defaults, and let's wait for the archetypes to load. So what we are doing here is essentially we are making a Maven based project, which is basically a simple Java project, and then we will see that how we can integrate Spring inside that. Okay, so we will take the Maven archetype quick start. Next, let's give it a group ID. Let me say Lalit, and I can say, let's say intro. Okay, and we will finish. So we got our project here. Let me just go to the navigator view. So now let's see pom.xml. Okay, so in pom.xml we have got the most basic things already populated. I'll just change JUnit to 4.11, and what I'll do is that now I'll import the Spring dependency. So the Spring dependency, I'll just import it from my other project. So I have got this dependency. Okay, And if you see, I have put the version as a in a parameterized format. This makes it easier to manage the dependencies. As we build more complex program, we'll have to bring more number of dependencies of Spring in, and if we have isolated the version number, it becomes much easier to manage it. Okay, so our POM is ready. Okay, so now what we'll do is that we'll write our hello world program. We can delete this, as this not of much use. And what I'll do, I'll make a class called hello world. Okay, let me get more space here. And our hello world is a very simple hello world. It returns a string whenever you say get me a message. So what we do, we say return hello world. Okay, perfect. Okay, now we need another thing which is called a configuration file. I'll call it application context.xml. And how does it looks like? Okay, it's empty. So let me bring something from my cheat sheet. So I put this thing here. If you see, it has got one tag called beans. Let's not worry about other things right now. So if we take a step back, what Spring essentially does is that when the program comes up, Spring basically is launched as a container, and you can think that this configuration file helps Spring in bootstrapping. It basically gives directions and instructions to Spring to tell Spring that basically what all needs and what all objects, classes, relationship needs to be instantiated. Okay, so let's do one thing now. We'll write a test to check that our Spring container comes up. So what we'll do, we will make a, let's make a JUnit class. Oops, little above. No, test. Okay, let's search it. So we need a JUnit test case, and let's call it hello world test. Okay, so our test is ready. Let's just run this test. Now let's run this test from here. So our test case passes. Basically it does nothing. No, sorry, it basically there is a failure because, yeah, okay, that's the default here. Okay, so now what we do is that we instantiate our Spring container. How do we instantiate it? Let me just pull from my cheat sheet again. I'll explain it. So what we do here is that we say application context, let's name it context, and I'll import all the things. So this is how we bootstrap the application. So what we tell Spring is that please bring your context up, and while you bring your context up, we can call it a container also, and when you bring your context up, please read this file application context.xml, which is residing in the class path, and bring the container up. Okay, perfect. Now what we do is that we need this hello world class. So we say give me the hello world class, basically give me the object of the hello world from the, and we can ask from the context dot get bean, and let's give this name and what kind of class we want. hello world dot class. Okay, now let's assert not null. So we expect Spring to return us this object. Okay, this is very important to understand. What we are doing is that we are not instantiating our object ourselves, but we are asking Spring to basically make us the object of hello world class. Let me just run this test. What happens? It fails. It fails. Why? Because Spring, the context doesn't know anything about a hello world object. So what we are missing here? Okay, so what we are missing here is that we have got this hello world class and we have got this instructions for Spring, but we have not connected both the things together. Let's do that. How do we do that? This is important. So we say bean id hello world, and I'll say class is equal to intro dot hello world, and I close the tag. Okay, now let me just run it again. It passed. Okay, let's just repeat it. We made a class hello world. We made a configuration file which is basically bootstrapping instructions for Spring, and we said that when this container comes up, please make a object of hello world, give it a id as hello world, which the class, the type of the class is com.ls.intro.hello world. Okay, and what we did in the test, we asked the Spring container to come up, and once this container comes up, I ask the container to give me the hello world bean to me back. Okay, so the important takeaway here is that we are not creating the objects ourselves right now. It's the responsibility of the Spring container to create the object. Okay, so this is very important. Now let's take it one step further. It's not a good idea to hard code the message here, correct? So what we do if we have to abstract the things, we make an interface. So we make a message interface, and what's the responsibility of the message? It basically now returns the message. Okay, and we make a class hello world message, and which comes from message interface. Okay, and we need to instantiate this interface, and what we do here, we directly hard code it here. In real world you can get this message maybe from your database or maybe some other mechanism, but right now we're just keeping it very simple. Now what we do in the hello world, we say that I need a hello world message object. Okay, and when I need to return it, I say get message. Perfect. Okay, now I go to my test class and I say assert. Okay, let me do one more thing. Okay, no, that's fine. I guess we can go back here. Assert equals, this is the string we expect, and we say hello world dot get message. Okay, let's see what happens. Let me run it. Oops, it fails. Why? There is a null pointer exception. Why that comes up? Because if you notice, we have said that okay, hello world will have an object of hello world message, but nowhere we are setting it, nowhere we are instantiating it. So who is going to instantiate and who is going to set the relationship between hello world and hello world message? Okay, yeah, that's the Spring's job now, correct? We are not going to do that. That's why Spring is there. If you do that, then what's the fun of using Spring? So what I do, let me just create a setter. Okay, I created the setter of hello world message, and I go back to application context.xml and I define another bean id is equal to hello world message class is equal to, let me do a little cheating here, hello world message. Okay, and what I do is I do something more here. I say property image equal to hello world message and ref is equal to hello world message. Okay, let me quickly run it. Oh, it passed. So what happened? We still did not instantiate it, but everything seems to have worked. Why? That's where the second most important aspect of Spring comes into picture. It's the ability to wire the relationships between objects. So if you see here, we again tell Spring to bootstrap itself with an object called hello world message, which is of type this class, and then between hello world and build a relationship and set hello world message inside hello world. And how would you set it? When you say property name hello world message, it actually goes and looks for a setter method, set hello world message, and passes the object to that one. And this all happens when the Spring container comes up, and by the time you are going and running your test, and by the time this line has executed, your container is completely ready with hello world object, with hello world message object, and the relationship is set between them. Now what we'll do is that we will do the same thing, but we will do the annotation way. I just showed the XML way because this is the most prevalent way till some times back, but now most of the things are moving towards annotation, and that's still people are divided between which is better, but I feel as you start working with annotation, you will start feeling comfortable with that. So what changes we need to do? So one change we need to do is that we will basically comment this. Okay, so let me comment this. So once I comment this, you know, my test cases will again start failing. Okay, as expected. So now what I do is that I tell Spring a little different thing. For that I'll need to include some new namespaces, which is, I guess it's already there, the context one, and I need to add the schema location for that. So I do this and come on, okay, and then I add two things to it. Okay, so one thing is that context annotation config, uh, and this basically tells that the Spring container to now process the classes after looking the annotations into them, and which all component or which all packages to scan, which is basically com.lalit, which in this case is almost all, it is all the classes that needs to scan. Now we go back to hello world Java, and what we say here is that we say I make it a component and I name is hello world. Okay, nothing changes here, it's only that the way we are working now is changing. Okay, and I basically auto wire it with a qualifier. Don't worry if you don't understand all of the things, we will come back to it in future series, but right now we are not doing anything differently apart from moving our XML configuration into the annotation based configuration. Okay, auto wired. Okay, and then we don't need the setter now in the annotation way. Okay, and what we do here is that pick this, come to hello world message, because we need Spring to read this guy also, message. Okay, now let me run it. Whoop, it passed. Okay, so we did not do anything differently, we just moved the configuration that was XML based to the annotation based, and that's what we will be using to show the future things. So here we have got an application which is completely using the Spring framework, and what it has done, it has basically made an application which does the hello world. Okay, so again reiterating back, the two takeaways here are that ability to create objects and ability to wire relationships. So what Spring is doing is that it's basically, once the container comes up and if you have wired your objects, your relationships correctly, the moment the container comes up, you are ready to execute your business. Okay, so hopefully I guess you get some idea of what Spring is all about, and thanks for your patience.